Hi, I'm Eric. Welcome back to Not an Audio Review channel where I don't review audio gear. Back in the first episode of this channel, I talked about how I had an experience where I felt like transformer coupled tube amps had a sound, a crispy heaviness to the note weight that I didn't get from solid state amps or OTL, output transformerless amps. To be clear, this isn't the same as the itchiness I get from R2R and AKM DACs that I talked about in my DACs episode. This is more just a quality I don't really like. This is a problem because I love tube amps, and transformer coupled tube amps are much more common, and basically if you want a tube amp for speakers rather than headphones, unless you have very high impedance speakers, which almost don't exist anymore, at least 16 ohms, you need a transformer coupled tube amp. The exception was amps from linear tube audio, which use some kind of fancy technological trickery to make an OTL amp with low output impedance. But LTA amps are very expensive, though not as expensive as amps from their big brother company, Burning. And I said that with CanJam New York, a big headphone convention, coming up, I was going to listen to the LTA amps again and see if they're really as good as I remember from the last time I listened to them at the last CanJam, and also try and listen to some really high-end transformer coupled tube amps to see if better transformers or whatever sounded different to me. So I went to CanJam. I brought with me my trusty, slightly modded HD6XX headphones and my Hiby R6 III digital audio player, which is an excellent digital audio player that has, in addition to single-ended and balanced headphone outputs, single-ended and balanced line outputs, which are meant to be coupled with a separate amplifier with a cable like this one, so that you can use the DAP as just a streamer and DAC. This way I could listen to just the amplifier I was trying out with the same streamer, DAC, and headphones every time. Now, take everything I'm about to say here with a grain of salt. A bigger one than usual since I have weird taste in hearing, because CanJam is very noisy, so listening to things with an open back headphone is suboptimal, and I listen to each of these things for 10 minutes at most. I've had the experience where I listened to something at CanJam and it sounded one way to me, and I got it home and it sounded different, or I was able to notice things about the sound I didn't before. But it's still the only way you're going to get a chance to listen to a lot of this stuff without going out and purchasing it or having a friend who owns it. This is the Viva Egoista Belva headphone amplifier. Actually, it seems to be half of the Egoist Belva, the other half being this power supply that's just as big as the main amp. Retailing for a mere $125,000, this is without question the most expensive headphone amplifier I have ever listened to. Is it good? Yeah, it's amazing. Honestly, I've never in my life heard the kind of separation, clarity, three-dimensionality, and dynamics that this thing has. It was crazy. Does it have transformer coupled crispiness? Yes, it does. As I think I said in the earlier video, I think this may be part of the hi-fi sound that people actually like in high-end amplifiers, so it might be tuned that way intentionally. Is it worth $125,000? No. Are you insane? If $125,000 sounds like a reasonable amount of money to spend on a headphone amp and preamp, then I hate you. I tried a bunch of other high-end transformer coupled tube amps at the event, including the Viva Egoista 2A3, the Prima Luna Evo 100, the Cayin Soul, the DNA Supernaut, which, holy hell, the bass on that amplifier though didn't just slam for days, and all of them had this sound quality to my ears. All of the OTC amps I tried had it, except two. The first was the Feliks Envy Anniversary Edition. Now, when I tried the Envy, I actually thought it was an OTL amplifier because all of Feliks' other headphone amps are OTL. And when I discovered it was transformer coupled, I had to do a double take because the amp sounds perfect. Honestly, and as I said, CanJam isn't the best place to listen to stuff and I didn't have a lot of time with it, but I couldn't find a flaw. Now, I tried the original Envy at CanJam the year before and I'd also liked the way that sounded, but I hadn't given it a lot of attention because I can't afford it. The guy at the booth said the Anniversary Edition, which costs much more than the regular edition, didn't actually sound all that different, but in any case, both are more than I'm gonna pay. The other exception was the Manley Absolute headphone amplifier. And this one I knew was transformer coupled from the beginning. Now in his review of this amp, YouTuber Joshua Velour, whose tastes and mine are very different, said that he felt like headphones weren't as lively in the treble as they should be with this amplifier. And maybe that's what I'm hearing, that it's taming the treble presentation somehow. But the Manley has some features I'd never seen before. You can switch between push-pull and single-ended topology, not to be confused with single-ended versus balanced signal, which is a completely different kind of single-ended, and it's very annoying to me that this term can mean two different things in the same device. What the hell? You can dial in how much global negative feedback you want. You can dial in how much output impedance you want, which is all amazing and would have been very useful to me trying to figure out why I like the sound of this amp if I'd realized it could do any of that when I was actually using it. Ugh. Now, the NV has single-ended topology, no global negative feedback, and adjustable output impedance. So it's possible those were the settings I had the Manley on, and I did figure out I could switch between push-pull and single-ended and preferred single-ended. And that's the key to an OTC amp that I like. Except the DNA Supernaut is also single-ended with no global negative feedback and adjustable output impedance. So it doesn't seem to be that simple. And the Manley and the NV don't use the same tube complement. So I don't think it's just some magical particular tubes. There's clearly something specific about how these amplifiers are voiced. And without knowing what that is, I have no way of knowing whether a particular OTC tube amp will sound the way I want it to. And of course, at $5,500, while the Manley is less expensive than the NV, it's still more than I'm going to spend. Meanwhile, yes, I tried the LTA Velo again with the Zodal technology that lets you get rid of the transformer and still have low output impedance. And it's still great, but now just in comparison to other OTL amps, it sounds a bit thin and bright to me, and just not my ideal sound. Like, it doesn't seem worth it to me at this point to pony up the many thousands of dollars for an LTA speaker amp, rather than just have an OTL preamp and headphone amp paired with a solid-state speaker amp. Like, there may be a world where I could find a speaker amp that sounds as pleasing to me as the Manley headphone amp, but doesn't cost so much I can't afford it, but I'm not really holding my breath, you know? Still, it'd be interesting to experiment and find out. Maybe one day. Oh, I also tried the Schiit Valhalla 2, which is apparently, at least in high impedance mode, something else, an OCL tube amp, which stands for Output Capacitorless, also known as direct coupling, meaning not only isn't there an output transformer, there's also not an output capacitor or anything else there either. This is relatively common for solid-state amps, but almost unheard of for tube amps because it's hard to do it in a way that doesn't melt your headphones or speakers. Meanwhile, in low impedance mode, the Valhalla 2 uses an op-amp or transistor in the output, which technically makes it a hybrid amp rather than a pure tube amp. And the Valhalla 2 will be relatively affordable at $500. Unfortunately though, I don't think it sounded that great, at least not to my tastes. But most Schiit amplifiers, though not my little Magni for whatever reason, have a bit of grit in the treble, which I think is intentional to give the sound texture, but which I don't like at all. I also tried a bunch of solid-state amps just to see if going upmarket in solid-state could get somewhere near what I like about tubes. And there were a bunch of truly excellent but extremely expensive solid-state headphone amplifiers, including the SPL Phonitor XE, the Audma GPA-1, the Violectric V324, the TNA HA200, the Enleum Amp-23R, and the Ferrum Oor. The Oor is something of a reputation for being boring in some circles, but I didn't think it was boring at all. The topping amps, now those sounded boring, just dry and flat and dead. But the Oor sounds great to me. But then, compared to tube amps in particular, the difference between good sounding solid state amps is much smaller, and often it's hard to pick out specific differences without the two devices sitting next to each other and switching back and forth, unless it has special features like the Audma crossfeed feature that makes your headphones sound more like speakers, pushing the sound away from you and spreading out the soundstage. But the one that really hammered things home for me was this one, the Kobo 465, an amp that's handmade by one guy in Japan. And at first I thought, oh, this amp is too bright for me, and it is a bit bright. But then I kept listening, and I have never heard a solid-state amp that can do tube-like holographic 3D presentation and body and form and dimension and solidity like this one. It's remarkable. This is probably the best solid-state headphone amplifier I've ever heard. But it costs $17,000. And you know what? I can pay that much and get a solid-state amplifier that can do that, or I can pay $300 and get an Xduoo TA-26. Now let's be clear. Am I saying the Xduoo TA-26 is as good as the Mass Kobo 465? No. If you want clarity and detail and fast transients and a low noise floor, all that kind of stuff, the Mass Kobo knocks the pants off the Xduoo unit. And as mentioned in my other video, the Xduoo amp, being an OTL, is only really ideal for high impedance headphones like my 6XX, and it doesn't have the power for hard to drive headphones. While the Mass Kobo can run just about anything. But for me, for my tastes, I'll take the smooth, sweet sound and holographic effects of the Xduoo amp for $300 any day. And man, if I didn't already own a TA-84, I'd buy the TA-26 immediately. I don't know what they're doing over there at Xduoo, but it's crazy. So it was next to Xduoo's new hybrid amp, the TA-33, which I thought was kind of meh. I haven't really heard an inexpensive hybrid tube amp that I really liked. I don't know. They just don't seem to do either being a tube amp or a solid state amp well enough for me. Maybe something will come along that will change my mind, but this isn't it. However, the TA-33 has a cool feature, which is that you can swap in and out the DAC cards, including one with a ROM chip, like my beloved SMSL VMV D2R. And using that DAC as an output into the TA-26, mwah, oh, that's the good stuff right there. Other things. I met up with an audio engineer friend, Parker Litchfield, and tried his new battery power amplifier and his associate headphone amplifier. Man, you guys wish these things were available for sale. It sounds so good. He really needs to commercialize his stuff already. I actually bought one of the PCBs for the associate from him and started building it. This is one of the last he has left, and he's not making anymore. Look at this cool. It's got BMO on it, and there's Jake dancing on the back. It's so cool. Anyway, yeah, this is one of the last ones that he's made. He's not making anymore. You can't buy it. I'm not helping you make purchasing decisions, but I'm going to build this myself. Yeah, I'll probably do a video about it once I do. I also met up with Ev from ETA Headphones and tried a demo unit of their new Ulli headphone, which is great, soundstage and layering for days, as well as Juan from Auribus Acoustics and tried his Sierra headphones, as well as a new one that's pretty impressive. These things have great prat and detail. All of these headphones have too much treble for me, if I'm being honest, but I hate treble and most people don't, so you'd probably like them. I do have a couple ETA headphones that I paid money for. Yeah, these things are really good. The best headphone I heard at the show, though, the Meze Elite. Really impressed me. I didn't like the treble presentation of the other Meze headphones that much. This is a theme with me, you might have guessed. But the Elite, man, that thing is genuinely well done. Like, it is treble, but it's so smooth and organic sounding that I liked it, and much better bass and staging ability than the 6XX. Too bad it's also just absurdly expensive, holy heck. Let's see, I also tried the Ferrum Wandla GoldenSound edition and traded it off with my DAP on the Oor amp. This is a really good sounding DAC, though I was disappointed by the tube mode functionality that seemed really subtle and didn't really make it sound like tubes to me, unfortunately. I thought the Impact Plus mode was also too subtle, but the spatial enhancement, that was pretty cool. Still, for the price, I'm not trading my D2R for it. So where does this leave me? I didn't go out and buy something too expensive after CanJam, which is a first for me, so that's nice. In terms of preamp headphone amps, for me, the limitations of the TA-84, and presumably the TA-26 as well, aren't the sound quality, but things like the volume knob not being granular enough and the noise floor being too high. Still, I think I can live with it for now. And that's where my script and my sentiment basically ended, until I got something that just changed my perspective on things altogether. But for more about that, you'll just have to subscribe and wait for the next episode. How's that for a cliffhanger? Do you have opinions on tube amps versus solid state or transformers versus OTL? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like if you like this. You know the drill. See you next time.